Welcome back to my third episode in my series of restoring this 3-litre Ghia Ford Capri. Previously got it up and running, and in the last episode drove it for the first time, albeit without brakes. And that's what this episode is going to be about, rebuilding the front brakes and suspension. So just to show you one of the issues we need to address with the steering wheel, perfectly straight. The driver's side wheel, to the eye at least, is straight. This wheel here, though, don't know if you can quite see it in the camera, pointing left. See there. So it's one of the things we need to tackle, along with the brakes. So first job is slacking off the wheel studs, jack up the car, get both sides up on axle stands. Next, remove the wheel. I'm going to concentrate on the passenger side first. And this is what's underneath. The eagle-eyed may spot that it's 2.8 injection struts and brakes that are on this car. It's been upgraded at some point from the 3-litre stuff. Discs are very worn. Track control arm there. You can see a gap between it and the bolt, which is causing the steering to be knocked out. First job was to remove the caliper, removing the brake pipe. Next was to try and remove the 2 caliper bolts from the strut. These were ridiculously tight. They weren't actually fully tight against the strut. There was a bit of gap between the bolts and the caliper, but it had been like that for a long time, and I was quite nervous that they might snap. I'm also looking at the caliper as I'm watching the video back, and I noticed that the bleed screws at the bottom, so I'm pretty sure these calipers are mounted the wrong way around, or I've refitted them the wrong way around. Not sure which. Anyway, eventually we did get the bolts moving. Just really tight. Loads of WD-40 in there, because the last thing I wanted to do was to snap them. And then once they were moving, they came out not too bad. That's the top one. So caliper off. Next job is to remove the hub so we can get the disc. The disc's bolted to the back of the hub, so off with the cap. A bit of a clean. It's full of grease, it should be. Remove the split pin. Then remove the sort of locking nut, and then the actual nut that opens the hub. Assemble it together. And then the whole hub with this comes out. Quick clean of the stub. Next job is the track control arm. So the castle nut at the end of here did have a split pin. That could have been an episode in itself trying to get that out, but eventually got it out. And with the breaker bar, got a bit of movement on the nut, castle nut. satisfying noise when it starts to move like that. And again, once it's cracked, it comes off not too bad. Next up, the track control. Sorry, tie rod end. The steering. Not off. Chop it through. And then the knot off the top. Knock it out. Not too bad. Then it was into the bolt, or the knot that holds the strut onto the track control arm. Can't see a great picture here with the angle of the camera. There's not enough room to get a socket in, so it's a spanner job. And it just wanted to twist the whole assembly. This is where experience comes in. The sensible thing is to leave the steering connected, so I've reconnected the steering here, as you can see. Double spanner trick to get a bit more leverage, and it was enough to crack the nut. And that's the nut removed. So the only bolt now holding on the track control arm there is the one that goes through the cross member. So I think it was a 13 or 14 mil each side. Screw that out. And pull out with a pinch bar. And in theory, that's the track control arm ready to come off the car. The reality was, it would put up a good fight, although it wasn't connected to the bottom of the strut. It was pretty well mated to it. A little bit of hammering and pry bar seem to want to separate it. You do get a tool for doing this. I don't have one. So a lot of faffing around, and eventually I decided I'll just drop the strut. There's nothing holding it other than the 3 bolts at the top. So drop the strut, and that would give me a better angle to try and separate the track control arm from the bottom of the strut. That's it off the car. That's the poor film in there, but that's the track control arm that we're trying to remove. It had sort of loosened a little bit, although it still wouldn't come out, so that's when hammering kind of the opposite direction of what you'd think to sort of get back in its original position. I've sprayed it with WD-40, etc. by this point many times, and then that's it there. You just see it there coming loose. Remove the nut again, and it's free. Next was back to the tie rod and the steering column, so thankfully these can be a bit of a job to come off, but it came off without too much of a fight. I was unable to fit the new one because the threads were damaged, so I had to order a die for that. In the meantime, I wanted to get the new track control arm in, so strut back in first, so the three nuts in the inner wing and at the top there. Tighten them up. Next, offer up the track control arm, so it kind of goes through the anti-roll bar, which is a fair bit of tension on it, into the bottom of the strut. Get these, say tightened up, but get them about 90% tight. Give them a really little bit of movement. And then try and pry it into the cross member there. There's a lot of torsion on the anti-roll bar, which makes it almost impossible to line the hole in the track control arm with that hole there. So I used a trick that I learned on wheeler dealers many years ago, which is to use a ratchet strap from one side to the other and pull it in. So you let the ratchet strap do the tension, and that pulls the arm in and get the bolt through. Goes the bolt through. Okay, so tightening it up. That's the bottom track control arm. This is the disc that came off. Four bolts there to remove it from the hub. I naively thought that I might be able to do this on the ground. How wrong was I? So, starting with the smaller ratchet, try and slacken them off. It's difficult to get leverage when the disc just wants to roll. Next, I tried with the 1/2" ratchet, a little bit more leverage. Again, maybe a little bit naive to think that that was going to work. So into the garage, holding the disc in the vise, chapping in a socket there, on with the ratchet, and still it does not want to come. These are ridiculously tight. I might not be muscle man, but I've been on there for a while. So out with the breaker bar, try again, disc slips in the vise, tighten the vise, try again. What I'm really nervous of here is starting to round the tops of the nuts off, then I'm in all sorts of trouble. So chopping on a socket so it's nice and tight. Might even be a size down, I can't remember. On with the breaker bar again, and that time it goes. So for the next three, it's kind of rinse and repeat. Obviously, once it's cracked, you can get it out with the ratchet at that point. But then, yep, tapping on the socket and then cracking them off the breaker bar. Get all four off. Now, you would think, or you would hope, that it would then just fall apart. But a bit like my track control arm, these have been on best mates for a long time, and they're pretty welded together. So, trying to chop the hub off the disc here, though it doesn't particularly want to come. So I got another hub which I had spare and used that to hit down on. This was also the following day, so it had been left to soak in WD-40 for 24 hours. Just keep going round and round, whacking the disc. You can't see it here, but I can start to see a sort of hairline crack appearing between the two. Starting to see a gap there between the hub and the disc, and that's it. They are free. Next job in the cards is to rebuild some second-hand calipers I bought. The ones that came off the car are, well, maybe not beyond saving, but they're not in particular great condition. This is a pair of calipers that I purchased, which need a new seal kit, but are otherwise in pretty good condition. So I've got the 4 cylinders there, I've got some new pins, got a box of seals. So with some red rubber grease, looping up the cylinders, looping up the seal that goes in the caliper, and then pushing them in, and there's a sort of dust seal around the edge. Appreciate it's difficult to see. But yeah, essentially just ensuring that the pistons are coming in and out without seizing up, and then I try to show you it there once it's done. So that's the calipers rebuilt and ready to go back on the car. By this point, my die has arrived for the steering rack thread. So clean up the threads, and the idea is put the die on and just sort of thread it in and clean up any rubbish that's in between threads, and if they have been cross-threaded, it'll just sort of correct that. But the die that, although I measured the thread depth, which was 1.25 mil, I think it was, the die was a little bit too big, so I kind of had to do it by hand, and yeah, just do my best to clean up the threads. Thankfully, it did work. It was enough to allow the sort of securing lock and bolt, lock and nut rather, to be screwed completely on, and then the new tie rod end after that. So this is just me kind of trying to say clean up the threads using a die that's slightly too big, but it's the right thread depth. That's the bolt on, the skewing bolt, and then this is the tie rod end itself. Previously it was getting on maybe 2/3 of the way, and then it was just getting stuck. Now it's going in right to the end. I haven't locked it in place because the wheel alignment will need to be done anyway, so I've just left it loose for now. And then pop that onto the steering arm that comes off the strut, which is what turns the wheel, and obviously pop on the screw nut at the top. Back to the garage now, cleaning up the hubs so that I can fit the new discs. This is again a few days later because I bought new bolts and sort of locking tabs that that were supposed to be on there. The old ones had absolutely disintegrated and rotten apart. Some copper slip on there, thinking of the next person that has to do this. That'll hopefully make it a little bit easier to detach the disc from the hub next time round. So offer the disc onto the hub, get it on roughly square. And then this is the locking tabs I was talking about. This is so that once the bolt's tightened up, sort of knock the tab against the bolt head and it would stop it accidentally coming loose. So putting them on sort of finger tight, then turn it over and just make sure that the hub is hard into the disc and there's not a gap. Just chop it all the way around until I'm comfortable that it's together. Obviously the nuts will pull it in a little bit as well, but and then same with the other two. Get them in. Get them up. And then put them in the vise so that I can tighten them properly. And then once I'm comfortable that they're tight, use a screwdriver or a chisel or a punch, knock down all the tabs. There's 2 on each bolt. Some of them a bit easier than others. So with disc on the hub and the calipers ready to go, it was time to sort of rebuild it. So slapping plate grease on, and I put more into the back of the hub. And then on the assembly, I've got the bearing, goes in, so plate grease on that. Maybe too much, I don't know, it certainly makes a mess. Then there's a washer, followed by the securing nut. That'll be tighten. It doesn't need much. And then there's this, I don't know what it's called, piece that goes over the nut and gets held in with a split pin so that it can't come out. Obviously if that was to come out, your wheel would come off. So quite a vital part. Split pin in. Then back on with the hubcap. Gentle tap. Back in place, re-clean up. And that is one disc and pad. Now I tried to put the caliper on, and if you remember it was really tight coming off. It was really tight going on, and because the bolts weren't right in, when they got most of the way in, it got stuck. So I got a tap, appropriate threads, and just ran it through, clean up the threads, particularly at the end where it was quite corroded. I'd known I was going to do this, I'd have done it before I put the disc on, but that's life. So clean them up with that. And then try to fit the caliper for a second time. New bolts as well. And the new locking tabs, again, was missing from before. You'll notice this time I've got the green bit there, which is where the brake fluid goes in, and just behind it, or just beside it, there's a black rubber bit. That's the bleed valve. I've got this facing up the way. I think that's right, because air floats, air goes to the top, so it makes logical sense to me, but maybe I need to go and swap these around if I'm wrong. I'm sure somebody will tell me. And then, again, grab over the locking nuts, the locking tabs against the nut, make sure it's not going to move. Then we're on to cleaning the car from snow, because I need to open the bonnet, and I've got about a week and a half of snow on it. So, using the caravan cleaner to shovel that off, pop the bonnet, and remove the reservoir cap for the brake fluid, because I don't want old dirty brake fluid going into the new calipers. So I am sucking it out with a syringe, and then I didn't capture a video, but I pressed the pedal a couple of times with the old lines going into that same cup, just to get any residual fluid out that was still in the lines between the master cylinder and the flexi pipe that I'm about to replace. So this is the flexi pipe that goes from the inner wing to the strut. There were braided lines on before, which are probably seen as an upgrade, but I've got no idea how old they are. So I'd rather have new, known good rubber lines than sort of second-hand, 20-year-old, maybe older, we don't know, braided ones. So tighten the nose up so it's secured to the strut. And then from the strut to the caliper, it's about a hard line, copper line. So we've got this brake flaring tool, some copper brake pipe. So the tool holds it in place. This die goes in the end. It's called a die. I'm calling it a die. Tighten that up as tight as you can. And that kind of puts a mushroom end onto the pipe. And then you sort of flare it for a second time, which just opens up the end a little bit. There you have it. So pop one end onto the car and then mark with my thumb where I need to cut the pipe. So chop the copper pipe, the length. Once that cut, just gentle file to the end just to get rid of any kind of marks from the saw. Get it as clean as possible. Pop on the brake pipe end and then repeat the process. So again, clamp the pipe with the flaring tool, hop on the die, Tighten it up. Move the die. Do the second flare. And that's that one ready to go. So we've now got a pipe, both ends done. So tighten that onto the flexi pipe, strap, and the other end goes into the caliper. Next is fitting the brake pads. Just using this tool to push in the pistons ever slightly further. Pop them in. Gentle tap with a hammer. Slide through the pins. Secure with a split pin thing at the end. Same with this one. And then there's these little clips which I'm not really sure what they do. I put them on anywhere. Anyway. And that's one side done. Now, the other side should be as easy as click, click, click. However, on the other side, both bolts that hold in on the brake caliper snap. So cleaned them up and was going to weld this, sort of technique I've used before. Weld on a nut, fill the center weld, and then screw it out. I usually do it with a MIG welder. Didn't have access to one. I don't have one at my home at the time. So I've got this little stick one, which I'm not really used much, to be honest. Thought it would be good enough to do this. Certainly got enough heat into it. You can see by the colour it's glowing red there. Once it cooled a bit, on with the socket and the ratchet, and this should, in theory, pull it round, slacken it, but what actually happened was that the nut fell off the end. So two more on, one on this one on the other one, for take two. Felt a bit more promising. I was able to put a lot more pressure on it this time, but ultimately it still snapped. Try this other one, which there's less of the old stud sort of hanging out of, so it's a little bit harder, and it just fell off as well. tried this multiple times. Went out to my dad's, tried it with the MIG welder, same issue. So what we're now trying is mole grips onto what's left of the stud. To be fair, I think the heat had helped. I got it slackened, and you can see it here. We eventually got, I don't know, about a tenth of a turn, and then from there it started moving. So we got that one out. The other one wasn't quite so easy because there was nothing to get mole grips on with, so we landed up welding a bit of a contraption onto the end of it with a pipe there to give us leverage, and it eventually came. Obviously with the length that we needed to get the leverage, it was then once it did slacken off, we had to cut it to get it to spin 360. And as you can see, the mole grips there start to get out. Other than this, the other side was basically the same as what we've gone through the passenger side. And that's it, both sides done. Spinning, discs in, not seized, new track control arms, flexi pipes, track rod ends. Good step forward, took a lot longer than I expected for various reasons, weather didn't help. Thank you for watching. Do like and subscribe if you've been enjoying the progress. Next video will be soon, going to be concentrating on the back brakes. I have made a start, so yeah, next video hopefully in the next week or two, which will cover back brakes and a few other bits and pieces that need done to the car. Cheers all.